Excellent.
Nice.
All right. And then you sent me the text.
Yeah.
And for that, now we got to go to Opera.
Is Opera a browser too?
Yep. One that we rarely use, but now we have to use it. Okay, cool. And I could have sworn you sent me. Yeah, you did send me the text, right?
Yeah.
All right. All right, let's see. Austin Audits. Okay, that's good. Let's get. Okay, great. Thank you for bearing with me.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to use the correction. Copy. Copy. All right. And let's see here. All right. Great. And now we put in your text. Five, 6. And now we put in your text for YouTube. 5, 6. And now we put in your text for Twitch. 5, 6. All right. Twitch has accepted the stream.
Yeah.
YouTube has accepted the stream. And finally, come on, Facebook. Facebook has accepted the stream.
Nice. Well,
Are you ready to start your show?
I am ready.
All right. When the timer says on the air, you're on the air, okay?
Can we just... Okay, the video looks good.
Wait a minute. You wanna check that?
Yeah, just test.
It's off?
Seems pretty close.
Well, let's wait. Let's do the refresh here. How's that? Okay.
Lightning fast.
Good?
Yeah, seems good.
All right.
Thank you.
So that means when the timer says on the air, you're on the air, okay?
Okay. Hello, Think Twice Radio, and welcome to an episode of Austin Audits, where we will audit Buffalo City Hall and some of the higher level things going on this week in City Hall and also in the city of Buffalo. So today's show, we're going to be viewing some clips from the recent New York State Legislature session where we had Acting Mayor Scanlon and the NYSDOT, or New York State Department of Transportation, Commissioner speak before the legislature. Then we're going to review some of the discussions around the city of Buffalo's enterprise solid waste fund, there's some concerning developments there. And then we'll finally be talking about Inrem53 and how the city of Buffalo stole surplus funds, amongst other things. So thank you for tuning in. My name is Matthew Austin, and I'm the auditor. I'm the lead producer and conductor of Austin Audits. So I am a former City of Buffalo City Hall employee, so kind of giving my unique perceptions into the going-ons in City Hall. And I'm really excited to kind of start this new chapter of Austin Audits, where I'm going to start just focusing on higher level stories that I don't think are getting coverage in the mainstream media and are kind of just passed over. So really excited to get deep in the weeds of some of the really important things going on in the city of Buffalo. So we got Nick's World tuning in here. So if you're watching live on Facebook, feel free to drop a comment and I'll be glad to respond. Or if you're watching this later on YouTube, drop a comment. And always looking for different perspectives on our audits here. So yeah, let's get started. So I have today's web page I have on my website, opendatamat.com/audit-250217.php, and that will get you to today's web page that I'm going to be using kind of as a script for today's show. So I guess the first clip I wanted to look at was we had Acting Mayor Scanlon. So the city of Buffalo's Acting Mayor Scanlon, he visited Albany recently. So early February, he visited the New York State Legislature, and he was on the council. I think it was the Committee for Cities, but essentially he was on a panel with mayors from the city of Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, and Yonkers. So those are kind of the I don't want to call them second tier, but New York City obviously is a massive city on its own. So the city of Buffalo usually gets grouped into this clip of smaller cities. So I think let's jump right into it. So I think the most important clip and what I want to start with were some of Mayor Scanlon's comments. He was asked by another local representative here, Pat Burke, was essentially asked about the city of Buffalo budget issues. So let's take a look at that clip and then do some commentary.
Fully explore all of your budgets, but understanding that at least some of you are operating at a structural deficit. Seeing that municipalities had a flood of cash from ARP dollars, I'm curious to know not just where we are now, but where we are 2, 3, 4 years from now. How we're going to make sure we're operating effectively, and frankly, not just coming to the state of New York. Like, we can't print money like the federal government, so we don't know what the next 4 years are going to look like. I'm guessing, judging by the last month, pretty chaotic. So just want to hear your perspective briefly on if you're operating at a deficit, how you plan to close that. Certainly, obviously, you're here to ask for state help, but in more, what is your plan? If you want to start with Acting Mayor Scanlon.
There we go. Thank you, Assemblymember Burke. I appreciate the question. Yeah, like many of the other cities, we are at a structural deficit within our budget. But again, as I mentioned during my testimony, that we are taking steps to address that internally first before coming to the state of New York and asking for help. I instructed my departments to come back with a 10% reduction within their department's spending, and that was due just a couple of days ago. We'll get back into that when I get back in town in Buffalo. Also, the fact that the city of Buffalo's tax rate is the second lowest across the state has to be addressed. For years, our tax levy did not grow. Between the years 2007 and 2020, there was virtual no tax levy growth. The strategy of not increasing taxes. And so we're woefully behind on our property tax and what we can bring in. So we're going to address that through reasonable property tax increases in the future. But also within the city of Buffalo, our issue is not one of spending. Our budget.
I want to stop that there, right? That's quite a statement there that the city of Buffalo doesn't have a spending issue. So let's continue on here.
Budget is not out of whack because of our expenditures. It's more of a revenue issue. When we talk about I talked about our property taxes. Everyone at the table has talked about AIM and the need for an increase in AIM. But the other thing, we are very much at a disadvantage compared to some of the other cities with our sales tax sharing agreement with Erie County. We receive somewhere around 11% of that, the county's taxes, where some of the other upstate cities receive 20, 25, 30% of their county sales tax. So we're at a major disadvantage there. Inflation is at 28% over the last 10 years. Our revenues have only increased 14%. So we have a revenue issue. So we're looking, again, well, to hold spending and reduce spending a little bit, we need to bring more revenues into the fold. And again, we're going to do that through our property taxes. Hopefully, we can negotiate a new sales tax agreement with our county. And then again, we'd love to see an increase in AIM attached to some sort of increase on a yearly basis.
Is that 10% across the board? Is every department, police and fire, are they all going to take a 10% haircut?
We asked them to come back to go through the exercise of looking at the 10% reduction. Police probably, we wouldn't be able to do that. I think police is 96.5% fixed costs, but do want to look at where they're spending money.
I don't believe that's true as well. I think there was a report just by the investigative post a couple months ago that the city of Buffalo Police Department was already $22 million on overtime costs. So I know overtime costs alone are less than 4% of fixed costs too.
But again, if we can get to 10% across the board as a whole, we're talking somewhere around $25 or $30 million.
So you can see there too what Mayor Scanlon, he's the acting commissioner has parroted this point of 10% cuts across the board, which are very minor kind of cuts. And it wouldn't surprise me if this original request to seek 10% funding cuts is then, when the budget gets passed, basically just staying flat. But that's a point that seems to be that they're really hammering home lately, is just slight costs and or cuts in cost.
A lot of overtime, right? That's where a lot of that money is coming from.
Correct. Police, fire, overtime. We have a new police commissioner. He has some ideas on how to reduce some of the police overtime. We've had conversations with our fire commissioner as well as how to address it.
And he said we have a new police commissioner because the acting Mayor Scanlon fired the police commissioner, which I think many believe was to help curry favors with the police union. So he's trying to consolidate power and get votes from the police union before the June primary.
That.
So yeah, that was the first clip, and I think obviously very concerning. I think it just kind of echoes a little bit of what we're going to see in the months to come. So I know early February was when essentially each commissioner within City Hall essentially presents their original draft budgets for next year's or fiscal year 26 budget. And yeah, what he requested was a 10% across the board. And you can already see kind of where this language is happening. So for those of you that might not know, early April, this is the first year they actually changed the rules, but in early April, acting Mayor Scanlon's administration will present a proposed budget. Then the council will have a few weeks to review. And then around middle of May or start of May is when you'll have some public hearings, and that's when the council will kind of negotiate with the executive branch or the acting mayor to come up with an adopted budget. The adopted budget is then adopted sometime in June, and that starts in fiscal year 26, which we run on a July 1 to June 30 fiscal year. So that's kind of coming, but you can already see, we're still early, but it doesn't mean we can't see, where this discussion is going in April and May. And essentially, the acting mayor is kind of posturing here. Obviously, you saw there, he said straight up that the city of Buffalo does not have a cost problem. So he's kind of, what he's seeing is proposed minor cuts, small incremental cuts in costs, but then also looking at what he's saying is a reasonable increase in property taxes. And he's not wrong there. When he talked about the city of Buffalo not raising tax rates, that's absolutely true. So the previous administration, the Byron Brown administration, kind of took the strategy of keeping taxes artificially low. So they didn't raise them. And I believe what we'll see, especially with acting Mayor Scanlon running for mayor, is kind of posturing and blaming the previous administration, which is completely valid, right? The previous administration did a lot of damage. But the thing is that acting Mayor Scanlon is not completely innocent here, right? He's been on the council nearly the entire time. I think he started in 2012. So he's been on the council rubber stamping these budgets. If it's been news, right? This isn't news to anyone. This has kind of been, people that are monitoring have been concerned with the budget and the unsustainability. And if acting Mayor Scanlon wanted to do anything he could have, he had the power to really push back on some of the previous budgets that got passed, but that wasn't politically popular at the time. And now and they're right. The city of Buffalo tax rates, unfortunately, they need to be readjusted. I've started doing some research, trying to compare the city of Buffalo tax rates to Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and Yonkers, and I'm hoping I'll be reporting on that soon. And one of the issues we'll talk on a little later is the enterprise waste fund. So the city of Buffalo definitely needs some new tax rates. They need to be adjusted. And I know one thing I'm particularly interested in is exemptions. So the previous administration also has given out lots of exemptions. So corporate exemptions where we have a lot of properties. I know, for example, the Tesla plant, which is actually owned by the Empire State Development. I think they have that entire facility is 100% exempted from taxes. So that owner, which is Empire State Development, actually pays $0 in property tax. When I think what they actually would owe on the property is $3 million. And I think the Harbor Center downtown is similar. They have a $44 million tax exemption. They pay $0 on taxes. So there's lots of issues within the actual, not just the rates, but actually corporate exemptions, which hurts revenues for sure. And especially with, I think what we're going to see here coming up is massive increases in taxes. And I don't want to speculate, but I think we're going to get some sticker shock here, especially when the general attitude or governing philosophy of the current administration is that costs are not an issue. This is a complete revenue. And I think I could rebut that, but I think we definitely do have cost issues, right? When we have, one example is, right, the city of Buffalo got found with a 50-50 fire clerk. So a fire clerk that didn't work for the city for 7 years got paid out $500,000. I mean, there's $500,000 cost right there. I'm also curious about how many other 50-50 jobs or like ghost phantom employees might exist. And I think, right, there's lots of cost issues. I think we have, especially I've started examining the police department because in this whole budget reconstructing, police is like the elephant in the room, right? They make up most of the expenses by far of departments. And even with them, most of the costs there are personnel. So actually police officers, it's not fixed costs, but lots of, personnel costs is essentially driving it. So that was the first and I think the most important kind of interaction during the legislative meeting. Let's move on to some of the other items. So here we had a discussion on PRI, which let's tune in to this.
Do you anticipate using any funding that you've discussed needing or wanting towards this issue?
Yeah, I think you touched on the issue that has been plaguing the PRI program is the pointing fingers between the city and the county for a number of years. I think we've moved past that, and I have a good partner in our county executive now. 2 years ago, I sponsored legislation that doubled the fee associated with the rental registration fee, which has brought in an additional $1 million into our budget, which paid for additional inspectors. The problem is they're just finishing up with all of their training. They'll be out in the field soon, and I think we'll be able to hit those goals in the near future.
So they were talking there about the PRI, which is the proactive rental inspection. And I know there'd been some community groups like the Partnership for the Public Good has actually sued the city because the city has legislation on the books that they don't enforce. So we have an issue that I think to rent a unit, it needs to be proactively inspected, but the city is not doing their due diligence. So that's a major issue that I've heard multiple times. I think there's members in the community that can speak to it more. And then in this other clip, which I thought was really interesting, right? You have the acting mayor of a city before the New York State Legislature. So this is not often that this happens, and each member of the legislature can ask a question. But check out this one question that I think is pretty bizarre for a legislator to be asking an acting mayor when they're before the council.
Mayor Scanlon, in all of the, I don't know how to put it, inquiries that I get to my office, there's one consistent thing that has kind of, what I would say, gone undiscussed. And in the city of Buffalo, there's an animal shelter, and we get quite a few calls in my office about the dilapidated conditions of the animal shelter. We've got a lot of folks who are very passionate about animals. They've gotten I think, nowhere at this point. What's your thoughts? Are we doing something on that? Where are we with the animal shelter?
Thank you, Assembly Member, and some of us took that Bills loss a little harder than the others.
I could imagine.
Yeah, but thank you for the question. Yeah, there's an issue there at the animal shelter that's being rectified. We are in the final stages of entering into a lease for a new location that is adjacent to some city-owned property, which would provide some green space for the animals as well. I understand, and I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of people within the community and the concerns and the issues that have gone on at the animal shelter for the past couple of years, really coming to light this year. I was unaware of some of the conditions that existed there, but they are being addressed, and we are at the very final stages of a lease entering in a new location.
Okay, thank you. And then to the rest of everyone here.
So yeah, I thought it was kind of bizarre for the acting mayor to be asked a question about the animal shelter, and this is something I think I'm curious in auditing too. But I've heard this now multiple times, especially there for like a state legislator to say that they get multiple calls about the city's animal shelter. Just really curious about the conditions there, and I've heard you've heard multiple politicians, and I've heard some on the council do talk about the conditions at the animal shelter. But I'm really curious about what does that mean, the conditions, how deplorable are they? And I think he said there that the animals don't even have green space. And I know at the Bray Miller meeting, it was actually proposed of maybe potentially using the animal shelter as a new police station instead of the Bray Miller market. And that was, I don't think, appreciated as an idea, but it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's something, and if anyone has any information about the animal shelter or maybe conditions, I think it's something I'm interested in maybe personally auditing because, just curious of what that means and how bad it actually is, and especially animals. We all, I think, care about animals, and it's important that we have humane conditions for them. So something to stay in tune more, and drop a comment if you know anything about the actual animal shelter. I might be interested in auditing the conditions there. That was Acting Mayor Scanlon's session in the committee. So to recap, really, I think the big takeaway we can take from this was you can already see some of the posturing for this upcoming budget season where, the administration is going to kind of focus on, costs aren't the issue, this is revenue. And unfortunately, I feel like the revenue is just going to come in the form of major tax increases to the homeowners of the city of Buffalo, which is concerning. And we'll get on that a little later, which is something I'll talk on towards the end of the show is the city's enterprise solid waste fund, which is actually underfunded. So not only are we going to see probably a tax rate increase again, but it looks like we're going to have another sewer or user fee adjustment as well. So now I want to jump into kind of the same idea of the New York State Legislature, but some comments by the NYSDOT, or I just figured out that the people in the know at the legislature, they call it NYSDOT, or New York State Department of Transportation. So we had the NYSDOT Commissioner Marie-Therese Dominguez, who's the commissioner, spoke before the New York State Legislature's Transportation Committee. And I thought it was pretty interesting, just some of the comments of, what she said, especially when we think about where we are, what we're dealing with here in the city of Buffalo, which is the Kensington Expressway project and potentially removing that. So the first clip I wanted to show was essentially what the NYSDOT commissioner did is just kind of present between the legislator, literally went across the entire state and highlighted all the great things that NYSDOT is doing across the state. So mentioned infrastructure projects all across the state. And let's take a look at when it came time to mention the cities of Rochester and Syracuse. The commissioner actually did mention the highway removal projects there. So let's take a look at this clip.
We see that already in places like Rochester, where the Interloop project has revitalized downtown neighborhoods, and in Syracuse, where the project to remove the Interstate 81 viaduct is generating jobs, economic development, and a new vibrancy in and around central New York.
So yeah, that's her highlighting Rochester and Syracuse. So again, she's mentioning the highway removal projects that NYSDOT is engaging in New York State, highlighting the great work it is. So obviously, what you'll notice there is that she didn't mention anything about the Kensington State Highway project, which doesn't make sense because, especially as a Buffalonian, right? Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, we think of ourselves as kind of very similar cities, right? We're all right next to each other, have many of the similar issues. So it would make sense for her to have mentioned the Kensington there, but she didn't, only mentioning highway removal in Rochester and Syracuse. And then she comes back to Western New York, and let's see what she says when she highlights the Western New York region.
In Western New York, the DOT is embarking on a project to enhance safety at an intersection in the fast-growing town of Orchard Park, home of the Buffalo Bills, where the construction of a roundabout along Armored Duels Road is contemplated.
So I think that's hilarious, right? They're not even doing anything. They're contemplating a roundabout in Orchard Park, and, right? So I would think that NYSDOT would have something in Western New York to highlight. I think the Kensington, right, would make sense, especially, right? This is the largest infrastructure project in City of Buffalo history, so it would make sense to highlight that. But right, to talk about proposed pedestrian safety, yeah, and they're contemplating a roundabout change in Orchard Park. So I just thought that was funny because, yeah, I think it kind of shows, especially with the ruling, yeah, it just shows the general, right? If things were going well for them, they'd be mentioning it. But obviously, sometimes what's not said says it all. But then during questioning, the NYSDOT commissioner was actually asked about the Kensington. So let's take a look at this. Is from one of the chairs from Onondaga County.
The Kensington Expressway Project has faced judicial roadblocks. What is the status of that project?
It is currently in litigation, awaiting a judicial decision.
So it's kind of stopped at this point.
At this point in time, we're waiting for the judge to rule.
So that was, yeah, the entire session. That was really the only mention of the Kensington Expressway. So just says that, yeah, it's in litigation and it's held up, which is true. So this was actually before the EIS ruling, but obviously at that point we didn't know what the ruling was going to be. But as I highlighted on last week's show, and some of you might have heard, the judge did actually order the state to conduct an EIS. So not only is it on pause, they kind of have to go back to the drawing board. So I have an excerpt here from the actual lawsuit. So the judge ordered an EIS. So we'll give it a read here of, given the low threshold to prepare an EIS and the state's failure to do so, the court finds the respondent's decision is arbitrary and capricious. As such, the petition is hereby granted in its entirety. The issuance of the permits by residents are hereby annulled. In addition, the negative declaration is hereby annulled. Respondents are permanently enjoined from proceeding with the project until it has complied with SECRA. The bond previously posted will remain in effect unless otherwise ordered. Respondents are hereby ordered to conduct and prepare an environmental impact statement concerning the affected areas of this project. Yeah, so essentially, since that NYSDOT commissioner spoke, essentially, yeah, the state now needs to go back to the drawing board and do a full environmental impact study. So I think between, right, the posturing there of the NYSDOT commissioner, now this ruling is really, that's the biggest development of, yeah, the state has to go back to the drawing board. So even you can kind of see there that the community, we really are winning between this lawsuit and now, right, the NYSDOT commissioner doesn't even talk about the Kensington in her address. It just kind of shows that, you know, the momentum is on our side for those that, you know, want to fully restore the parkway, which I think is encouraging. So this also has, right, and then after this, I think Acting Mayor Scanlon, he had talked about how, right, the court's ruling. And now essentially the politicians that went from completely silent on the issue are now starting to talk about it, but they're not starting to talk about it as in we want full highway restoration. They're kind of talking about it as if, you know, we will follow the court's order and you got to follow the rules. So they've kind of gone from not talking about it at all to now kind of just admitting that something was wrong and they need to follow the law. But no politicians have come out. But we actually had not acting mayor, but State Senator Sean Ryan, who is running for mayor, was actually on this podcast, Community Talk episode 3, and was asked about the Kensington project. So let's take a look at, right, this is State Senator Sean Ryan, who's, right, a New York State Senator, so obviously has power at the state level, is running for City of Buffalo mayor, and is, at this point, looks like the likely Erie County Democratic nominee, and definitely one of the heavy favorites with Acting Mayor Scanlon to be mayor. So let's see this kind of exchange.
what's going on, we see a lot of things in 33 Expressway, right? There was a lot of we are two parties. So some we are supporting, some the neighbors don't supporting. Do you have anything about 33 Expressway you can say?
I'll tell you this. I read the judge's decision last week, and he said the state didn't follow their own rules. The state's got to go back now and look at all different alternatives. And then also you have to measure the environmental impact on it. So, applaud the judge's decision. And anytime we try to rush projects, usually ends up meaning you're cutting corners, and those corners are often mandated by law. But I'm going to switch to I'll switch and ask a question back over to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So don't
ask me
the other new
tough question.
Yeah, the other new element in Buffalo is, in the last 15 years we've had new Americans from all over the world coming into Buffalo.
Right, so I think right there what you saw is a very slick, right? Sean Ryan, I think he's a politician, right? And I think you saw it there, asked a question and just was able to kind of answer the question without answering anything. So kind of just said, the court's made a decision, you got to follow the rules, and then kind of flipped it right around, where I would have loved to see, especially someone running for mayor. I was just reflecting with the group of the Parkways. We just want politicians to say they support full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. That's all we're asking them to say. And I was laughing because it's not funny, but it's like we're not asking them to sponsor something like, I don't know, we're just asking them, we just want a parkway. We want them to support fully restoring the parkway, and no politicians will say it, which is kind of funny. But yeah, you saw him there. And what I've heard from behind the scenes too is that ultimately State Senator Sean Ryan is in support of connecting the parkway, and that's ultimately on his long-term vision for the city. But the reason he's not publicly saying anything, it sounds like, and actually I'm recording this on the 17th, but I believe tomorrow is the Erie County Democratic Committee's final mayoral event. And essentially what Sean Ryan's trying to do here is he's trying to not come out in at least, but I'm just speculating. This is what I've heard, and I think it kind of makes sense with the theory. He's not coming out to say it because he wants to get the ECDC nomination. And it sounds like he's worried that if he came out before the ECDC final endorsement, that Governor Kathy Hochul might try to pressure the party to endorse Scanlon. And Scanlon, of course, was just in Albany and is trying to become acting mayor. So it's just an interesting, right? In this race, we're still very early in the mayor's race, but it's interesting to think, right? I've just started asking myself, why won't any politicians, right? How do none of them have, their finger in the air to see where the wind's going? And we just want them to say they support it, not even that they're going to do anything about it, just that they support full highway restoration. It wouldn't surprise me if Sean Ryan, and I think it's believed by most people in the know that he will eventually support it, but he's just kind of, again, a politician of kind of calculated, not saying what they really think, but trying to calculate, the timing of it when it's right. So it's interesting. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true, but I think it makes a lot of sense, especially with this vacancy in the mayor's office. You have all these horses posturing, and really the two biggest horses right now in the mayor's race are acting Mayor Scanlon and State Senator Sean Ryan. And I believe they kind of represent two establishments, but kind of different establishments, right? Acting Mayor Scanlon, right? He's Scanute's boy. So he's, his dad was the patronage czar for Jimmy Griffin. So he's kind of really tied up with the City Hall establishment. And then you have State Senator Sean Ryan, who really is really lockstep with ECDC and the Democratic Party. And there's actually some even rumors that Sean Ryan's the preferred candidate of ECDC because the ECDC chairman wants to be state senator. So they're trying to, vacate one seat, hop in the other. But it's just interesting because I think the City Hall establishment and the Democratic establishment, it's kind of a Venn diagram where they do overlap, but they're also completely kind of different power factions. So it's just interesting to see there. And I think what you saw there is, right now, I'm not anti Sean Ryan. I think, he wouldn't be a terrible mayor, but you just saw their very polished politician of taking a very controversial question, kind of, dealing with a little bit, not making any outrageous statements, and then changing the discussion in directing the conversation where they did. But as far as I know, that's the first public comments by one of the leading candidates in the mayor's race. I thought it was interesting. I think it'll just be interesting to monitor too over the course of the race. And as that project evolves, right, we're not even sure now what the EIS thing will look, but just interesting to monitor what the discussion of the Kensington project will be in the mayor's race and how maybe the tones and positions of the mayoral candidates will change based on the time of the year, which way the wind's blowing. Okay, so we're about halfway through the show. So that was kind of really high level, I think, going on with City Hall, right, New York State Center and stuff. And I think the Kensington is really one of the largest generational issues. Then you also have the mayor's race. So those kind of two issues, I think, at the high level to just kind of see which way the wind's blowing. But I wanted to move on now to some of the more in the weed things at City Hall. And the first one was the city's solid waste fund. So agenda item 25-131, which is a City of Buffalo management letter. So this item came before the City of Buffalo Finance Committee last week, and it was really an interesting discussion. I think it brought up some really concerning concerns about the city's solid waste fund. So let's take a look here at some of the discussion, and then I'll follow back with some deeper in the weeds. But let's take a first look at kind of some of the discussion in the council chamber. I believe this is by the deputy controller, who was Byron Brown's commissioner of admin and finance, but was fired by the acting mayor, and then just kind of went over to the controller's office. So let's see what he has to say.
I can identify as the solid waste. This has been an ongoing concern with Dresser Malecki and also with the comptroller in regards to the solid waste. Had a accounts receivable balance of almost like $23 million at the end of June 30th, 2024, which increased about $4 million from fiscal year 2023. The city definitely need to have like a plan in order to have revenues match actual expenses when it comes to the solid waste account. So that's something where they have noted over XYZ number of years, and it's something that we do have to take into consideration for the solid waste count to be able to take care of itself and not have the need from the general fund to cover any shortages.
Deputy Controller, I'd like to just talk to on that point specifically, because last year this council voted to raise the waste fund to make sure that we were able to, it was a pretty significant raise, to make sure that it was self-sustaining. We were told at that time it was going to be self-sustaining.
Deputy Controller Delano Dow, it's hard to determine as you increase, and I think it was a minimum increase that we actually did do last year. Costs are going up, so even with that increase, the city still lost $4 million in that account. And right now, the solid waste account owes the general fund account $23 million. So that's been over in a period of time where the general fund has been subsidizing the shortage in the solid waste fund. So we really do need.
So I'll stop it there. So what you heard there, and I apologize, the audio, there's some issues with the council streaming. They like only stream audio like on the right ear. But yeah, what you heard there to kind of summary was a discussion around the city's solid waste enterprise fund, and essentially high level, it's running an annual deficit. So it's running a $4 million a year annual deficit, and not only is it running an annual deficit, it's actually been borrowing money from the general fund. So it actually owes $24 million in debt to the general fund because they've been subsidizing the annual debt with general fund money, which, as I'll get into here, might not even be technically legal. So kind of this issue, or the item they were talking about, was this this management report by Drescher Malecki, which is like the accounting firm that literally does all the auditing for City Hall. But they came up with like a management report. And yeah, so let's read that here if I can get a good zoom. So yeah, it says solid waste and recycling funds. This is right from the Drescher and Malecki audit report. Program revenues within a business type activity should be adequate to meet the expenses of providing the services for which the fund is responsible. right? So revenues must equal expenses. Consistent operating deficits of the solid waste and recycling fund have caused a fiscal strain to the city's general fund, which resulted in significant interfund advances to provide sufficient cash for current solid waste and recycling fund operations. Over the last several years, the city's general fund has provided cash advances to the solid waste and recycling fund to subsidize operational costs. As of June 30th, 2024, so the end of last fiscal year, the amount that the general fund has advanced to the solid waste and recycling fund has grown to $23,399,207. In fact, the solid waste and recycling fund has been unable to reduce the outstanding loan balance since the year ended June 30th, 2021. As of June 30th, 2023, the advance amount was just over 19 million. As of June 30th, 22, it was 15.6 million, and as of June 21, it was 12.4 million. The solid waste and recycling fund's cash flow from operations reported losses of approximately 4.1 million and 3 million for the fiscal years ended 24 and 23, respectively. So what that's saying there is that the city's solid waste fund has been increasing, the amount. It's been borrowing money from the general fund to cover operational losses. So every year it's incurring losses because the revenue or the tax or the fee is not covering how much it costs to run the fund. Well, this is concerning because this next part. So consistent with Section 216.58 of the city's charter, we recommend that the city establish adequate solid waste and recycling fund, basic residential and commercial rates that will generate sufficient revenues to support program expenses within the fund. We further recommend that the city seek legal opinion to determine the appropriateness of the budgeted operating transfer made from general fund to the solid waste and recycling fund. So essentially what they're referring to is the city's charter, right? 216.58 of the city's charter. So what's 216.5 of the city charter? So there's actually a section of the city's charter that talks specifically about a solid waste enterprise fund, which I've copied here. So let's jump down to read that because I think it's important to say what the actual charter. So the charter is kind of like the constitution of the city. So it says, that section says, the controller shall establish and maintain separate fund to record and report the financial activity related to the public collection and disposal by the city of refuse, recyclable, and other solid waste material as designated by the commissioner. This fund shall be separate and distinct from the city's general fund and shall be known as the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. This fund shall be maintained on the same fiscal year as that of the city, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary. The fees, charges, late fees, interest, and other costs and disbursements charged and collected pursuant to Article 15 of the Charter or this chapter pertaining to public collection of solid waste shall be paid into the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. Right? So it's right there, it's saying that all the fees, charges, interest should all go through the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. So each year, the mayor, at the time of the submission of the annual budget estimate to the Common Council, shall submit a statement of estimated revenues, expenditures, and changes in the fund, as well as the fund balance for the current fiscal year, together with an estimate of expenditures for the next fiscal year, and shall recommend basic residential commercial rates for public collection. So that's what the charter says, right? So a couple things that are concerning there is that one, the charter specifically says that there shall be a separate fund specifically for recycling and refuse collection. So that's what the charter says. So, which is different than the general fund. So when we have a situation here that the city has been subsidizing the solid waste fund with the general fund, it brings into question what's right. If the general fund is just giving cash to the enterprise fund, then you really don't have a separate fund. You just have a fund with a different name of it. And as the Dressler-Malecki audit report came out with, there's been, this has been going on for multiple years. So, right, the Common Council, they approve budgets, and it's their job to, every year when the mayor's proposed budget, look at the enterprise fund. So this is multiple years now. There's multiple members of the council that could have been and should have been, and it's their duty to have been having to monitor that. So every time they approved the budget, they should have seen, hey, the solid waste enterprise fund is running an annual deficit. What are we doing about that? And yeah, the administration, you'll see the Common Council, right, blame the previous administration. Whoa, Byron Brown, he left us in a bad, which is true. But the truth is also that the Common Council has been failing their duty to monitor. They're the ones that approved the budget, and this has been going on for multiple years. And now you actually have a legal situation of now the city, right, which brings me to the rest of this conversation. So that was kind of the intro of what's going on. Let me see here before we watched a video of the next. So it says here from the Dreschler-Mullicky audit report. Let's see here. We have a comment here. I'm happy to get your take on all this. It's hard to understand their BS explanations. Well, yeah, thank you. That's why I'm trying to explain this. So I think that's why I'm trying to make my show about this strategic stuff that's, right in here. But, I want to kind of warn people before this happens right in May. So it says here from the audit report, the management report, the city should update and improve their current formal plan to have the general fund recover the amount it advances to the solid waste and recycling fund. The plan would require that not only should the basic residential and commercial rates generate sufficient revenue to support program expenses within the fund, the rates should also enable repayment to the general fund for the accumulated prior advances with interest. Let me read that again. The rates should enable repayment to the general fund for the accumulated prior advances with interest. If the city ascertains that such a funding plan is not feasible, the city should determine the legal appropriateness of having the general fund subsidize the solid waste and recycling fund. Right, so very concerning. So it's saying, right, and from that clip we saw in the council, the city's solid waste enterprise fund is running a $4 million a year annual deficit. So every year that it operates, it's increasing $4 million a year in debt, and that's increasing because the cost is going up. And while it's generating a $4 million annual loss, has already borrowed nearly over $23 million. So that controller report is saying is that the rates will now have to go up to, one, cover the annual expenses, and then not just cover the annual expenses, which is a $4 million gap, but it needs to start paying back the debt with interest that it's owed to the general fund. So really, an all-around calamity of what it looks like. And then here's the last comments of the plan. So view of responsible officials in plan corrective action plan. The city continuously monitors the financial activity in the solid waste and recycling fund. During the past fiscal year, the solid waste and recycling fund ran a deficit and was unable to reduce the outstanding receivable due to the city's general fund. However, an increase in the solid waste user fee was enacted for fiscal year 24. Additionally, the administration will discuss options to increase solid waste revenues and decrease expenditures during future budget processes. So, with that being said, let's see what the administration had to say. About that. So here's a clip with the acting finance commissioner.
Acting Commissioner.
Right now is with the Acting Commissioner of Administration and Finance. That's an exercise that we're going to determine again as part of the budget process that we do every year. Let's just remind ourselves there was an intention to go every other week with recycling. That would have saved us at least $1.5 million just off the front there. We are looking to resume that again. We'll see. But then we also have to just explore the revenues in general. But with that said, there's also personnel costs that do escalate each year. We have Local 264 that did see a contractual increase as well in that fund. So it's right now a matter of just playing catch up with that. So we're trying not to give people sticker shock with the user fee and have it gradually catch up. So we're exploring that though as part of the budget process.
Thank you, because $4 million.
So yeah, so essentially what you have the acting commissioner there say is that, and this is where the rest of the conversation that went in the council's chambers. They actually started talking about maybe moving to every other week for service, which would get into issues of recycling, right, and garbage. And yeah, essentially, right, the big scary thing here, which is coming down the pipeline, looks like, is like not only will they be expanding, right, the user fee, but while we have really drastic increases in user fees, you're going to have a potential cutting in half of services, which would be just bad enough if, right, what I covered earlier of the actual taxes are going up too. So we have a question here of if they're out of money, how are they supposed to pay interest? Well, Well, yeah, that's the question. If you don't have money, right, and as the acting mayor says, we don't have a cost issue. There's no cost issues. It's all revenue. Well, the only way the city can get revenue is through taxes. So I think what we're in here is we're in for sticker shock come April, May, massive increases in taxes and fees, and potentially decreases in actual services. So very concerning, and especially, yeah, these are structural issues that have been going on. And yeah, here, this is all done right while our acting mayor, right, is acting as our mayor, because our mayor, I compare it as like, imagine, right, the captain of the Titanic knew it was heading for an iceberg, and before it got to the iceberg, he, got in a raft boat and bounced. That's essentially what the mayor's done. So this is all stuff that's been going on for years now, and he knew all this was coming and decided to jump ship before, and here we are left holding the bag. So yeah, that's my deep dive audit into the city's solid waste enterprise fund. And yeah, I think it's just, right, it's, yeah, concerning. And yeah, we're essentially going to be seeing these discussions in the council chambers play out in April and May. And it's best that we start strategizing too now. So if that wasn't enough, also in the finance meeting, it was a barn burner. They talked about the stolen Inrem funds. So for those of you that might not know, the Inrem is essentially the city's property auction. So, right, so the city, this was more popular maybe 10-ish so years ago or a while ago. They used to actually have auctions where you could, right, people that didn't pay their taxes or user fees, the city would then auction off their houses to kind of get that money back. And the thing is, from my understanding, is that the actual Constitution demands that, right? If the government seizes your property, so say you owe $100,000 in taxes, right? They can auction your house, but if they sell your house for $200,000, they take, $100,000 to pay off the arrears or taxes you owe. But then that actual surplus fund, so whatever your house was sold for above and beyond what you owed, that money is actually yours. It's not the government's. And what we have here, and this is something that's, I think, been going on or it hasn't been discussed, but actually came before the council, was just a discussion around these actual surplus funds. So I wanted to read an item that was on the agenda. This was a resolution filed by Council Member Wyatt called Item 25-267, a resolution requesting an update on the Inrem auction process and surplus funds. So he wrote a resolution here that says, whereas concerns have been raised regarding recent challenges in the Inrem auction process, the legality of proceeding with future auctions, and the administration's compliance with legal requirements related to surplus funds from past auctions. So whereas in 2023, the U.S. Supreme Court determined that surplus plus generated from Inrem auctions must be returned to property owners, but it remains unclear whether the city has properly distributed or accounted for the return of surplus funds in compliance with this recent precedent. And whereas it is in the public interest to ensure transparency and legal compliance in the administration of the Inrem auction and distribution of surplus funds to protect the city and protect property owners. And why this is an issue is that the city actually hasn't held the Inrem auction in a couple years. One, but I think mostly because of this Inrem53, which was, I think, one of the, maybe 2019, the actual auction. But yeah, essentially, from my understanding, what happened is the city they took all the money in from the auctions, and then all the surplus funds that were owed to homeowners that they had taken houses from were never paid out because they just went into the general fund, which is theft. They literally stole people's houses and stole the money that was rightfully theirs. So this was, there was a long discussion, and I have the clip here that you can watch, but I wanted to talk this one specific interaction between the city's corporation counsel, which is the law department, and one of the council members. I think kind of says it all. So let's take a look at this.
The court has determined Inrem53 was challenged in two separate actions, and we have two judicial decisions where the court said if the city wanted to, if the city sought to distribute those proceeds because they were at the time a sale of city property, then it would be a gift of public funds, which means that the city would be violating the state constitution in sending those funds to any prior homeowner or any mortgage holder or any debtor that had an interest on those properties. So it wasn't just cutting off the interest of a homeowner. It's also banks that were that are part of the foreclosure, other debtors that are part of the foreclosure, that all of their interests, all of their rights and equity are cut off. So in order for the city to, after those interests have been cut off, to then turn around and remit a cash payment, then we would be in violation of the state constitution.
Is there any remedy to make those individuals whole? Can the city petition the courts to allow them forgiveness because of the city's ineptitude when they made this policy change?
I'm just going to say no.
That was
So
the
they're
best
just out
moment
of
there.
it.
So what you had there was an exchange between Majority Leader Leah Halton Pope, who's one of the newer council members. So she was not kind of around when this all was getting around. You saw her ask her question, right? The city was incompetent. They did the wrong thing here. Is there a way to make them whole? The corporation council, they're just saying essentially no comment. So let's see here the kind of the follow up there.
That whatever money they lost, because they've lost their homes, they've lost everything because the city made a decision to change its policies based on previous corporation council. And because of the rules as they were, these individuals will never get their money back. So they lost their homes, they've lost everything, and we cannot make them whole.
The law at the time provided for an extinguishing of all of your rights and interests in the property. So you were immediately cut off. So there is no clawback provision that would.
So my understanding, and I'm not a legal lawyer, and I have not read the case law of this thing and the whole thing, but my understanding is that essentially what the city did in this interim was they took title to the property, and then since they took title, they were then auctioning off city property. So if they sold the money that they did from selling city property, it would be a gift of public funds. And this, right, a government can't not just gift public funds to anyone. So that's my understanding, and I don't know if that was different of they used to actually with the title thing, but there was some heated discussion there from in that discussion. I recommended some of the council members got fiery because essentially when you boil it down, the city of Buffalo violated the law. They took people's houses, auctioned them off to pay past due arrears, and then that extra money they just put it in the general fund, which is illegal. And I think the reason that you haven't seen any more interim auctions is because if the city held another auction, it would put the whole interim, that fund would then bring it up. So it's been easier to kind of not do an interim. And that's kind of one of my other points I wanted to make is you saw there, right, that was the Corporation Council of the city and Assessment and Taxation Commissioner Jason Schell. And that's kind of my critique too, is that Byron Brown has drove the city into the ground, and he's off now in Batavia Downs, but a lot of the dragoons that he had running his operation are still in City Hall in right there, the Corporation Council and the Assessment and Taxation Commissioner are responsible for that actual, theft of people's property. And it's just very, very concerning because the people that have been making these draconian policies are still operating and running the city, and they just never really have any consequences, right? They stole, especially people that are behind on their taxes and fees, right? Those aren't wealthy developers that have massive tax exemptions. Those are working class people that, especially, it's concerning too, right? When the city used the American Rescue Plan for revenue replacement, there could have been an opportunity to correct things like the solid waste enterprise fee or this Inrem auction, and it's just concerning because there's just so many things I think wrong with the city of Buffalo, and there's just so much corruption and just the culture there. Just very concerning, and I think that was just something I wanted to highlight because it happened and it just hasn't got the coverage, and I would love to hear some of the stories of the actual. I couldn't imagine if as a homeowner or a property owner, the government took your property and then, right, not only do you not have your house or your home that you lived in, but now you don't even have the money that it was owed. So you're kind of, really bad spot. And it's interesting. Maybe I'm interested to kind of read some of the law cases that the Corporation Council inside and some of the renderings, because that's why the city doesn't hold auctions anymore is because they actually made a big oopsie and took money. I think it was like $3 million. I heard was the number that they took from homeowners. So yeah, those are kind of some of the big things that happened in City Hall this week that I wanted to address. But with about 4 minutes here, I wanted to kind of maybe take a lighter tone and talk about crypto coins. So there's actually been some exciting developments, but there's actually maybe a chance to envision some new financial rails for the city. So this week I learned about BuffaloCoin. So BuffaloCoin is a local currency for a local economy. So BuffaloCoin is a local currency system designed around the tested and secure software of Bitcoin. So like Bitcoin, BuffaloCoin is mineable and has no centralized authority, is impossible to counterfeit, is instantly verifiable, and has low transaction fees. So there's actually this thing called BuffaloCoin, which is essentially, from my understanding, a fork or just a copy of the Bitcoin code. But yeah, it's an interesting idea of maybe a new cryptocurrency for Western New York. So if you go to BuffaloCoin.org, you can learn more about BuffaloCoin, and I'm not sure if I'm sold on it yet, but I think it's worth just talking about because I think there's we just saw that the city stole funds, so I think, and you can't really trace it, but if you go on to the BuffaloCoin blockchain explorer, you can actually go to explore.buffalocoin.org, and you can actually see blocks that are being mined. So right now, we're on block, I think it's 8502. So you can see there's actual miners going on, creating BuffaloCoin. So it's interesting, just an interesting philosophy. And yeah, I know one thing I'd love to see in actual government, especially the city of Buffalo, would be to adopt cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. I think there's an opportunity to potentially reconfigure Buffalo as maybe the new financial capital of New York State. So I think for decades now, or maybe centuries plus, like the financial center of New York State has really been around Manhattan, Wall Street. And yeah, I think especially with how draconian some of the regulations are in New York State around crypto, maybe there's a potential to kind of be the defier of the New York State financial services and really make a home. Because I think one thing that's concerning is a lot of innovators have left New York State due to some of their policies. But that's one crypto coin. And then the other one I want to talk about was BuffDoge. So Buffalo Doge, it's the official Solana meme coin of the City of Buffalo Department of Government Efficiency. So yeah, there's this meme coin. Those aren't familiar. There's a whole, I think meme coin is just an interesting topic, but essentially, there's essentially a meme coin called Buffalo Doge now. Essentially this is pump.fun, and it's interesting, but this the whole idea of meme coins, you can essentially go in here and trade meme coins. And I think meme coins is a topic for another show, and especially could get deep dive into just the philosophy of meme coins. But there's this whole internet revolution going on, and it'd be interesting. Especially you've seen meme coins in the news, but I think while they get laughed at, and there's definitely lots of fraud in the meme coin space, I think it's an interesting subject, and it kind of encapsulated just the internet culture meets government culture. So that was today's show, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I was just really enjoyed kind of getting into the weeds of some of the systemic issues in the city, and thanks for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Matthew Austin, and that was an episode of Austin Audits. So until next time, Auditor out.